Welcome to Mother's Haven, a podcast where mothers are challenged to try for more through access to help, hope, and a pathway to healing. Every mother goes through various phases and seasons where they daily navigate distress, discomfort, and wholesome experiences. I have personally walked the path of various pain points and experienced certain life changing situations in my own journey, which actually brings me here to offer you a hand to help, a voice of hope, and a pathway to healing. Each time you listen, a rush of liberation comes through because I'm here to validate your freedom and also to challenge you to be a mother and much more. Welcome to yet another episode on Mother's Haven podcast. As we know, we always bring in amazing and super intelligent and amazing guests to be able to provide impact and give us that help, that access to healing, and that hope and courage that we need to enter into our next level of greatness. So today, as always, we'll have a special guest who will be telling us about herself in a minute, and I would like us to prepare our minds to receive and also be able to step into our next level and elevation. So over to you, our amazing guest. Please introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you so much, Timmy Tokwe. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you, our listeners, for availing yourself the opportunity also to glean knowledge, share knowledge. Thank you so much. So without much ado, my name is Ezinne Okule here, also popularly known as the Mind Reformer. I am a self-actualization coach. I'm also an optometrist. My purposeful work is basically hinged around helping people live a life of impact, life of influence, and then a life of affluence. In a nutshell, I help you unleash your greatness one version at a time.
Wow, that's super amazing. I like the last line. In a nutshell, you unleash your greatness one at a time. Amazing. Well done so much for the great work that you do. All right, so straight into our conversation. So you're a mind reformer and you also talk about unleashing your greatness. So I would like you to link the two and tell us more about how the mind plays a major role, a capital role in helping anyone, any woman, any mother to be able to achieve her greatness, to be able to step into her next level of greatness. So how does the mind come in? How does the mind play a major role?
Okay, thank you, Timmy Tokwe, for that question. I love the question so much because this is basically where my work, is primarily focused on. Because I've discovered that for everything we will see in life, for every step we'll take in life, for every season we will step into in life, we must have first of all stepped into it in our mind. So if we have not caught it in our mind, we cannot experience it in our lives, especially for women. And that's because every day the society, culture, our environment, our circumstances, things that we go through is handing us what I like to call auto-suggestions of what we cannot be or what we cannot do. Usually, we don't really have auto-suggestions. It happens sometimes, but it's rare of what we can be. Most auto-suggestions are what we cannot do. So you walk through the streets of social media and you see somebody doing something. And funny enough, that thing suggests to you that you cannot do it. You are in a company, even if you're in a C-suite level, and then you are called to manifest a higher dimension of what you are doing in that company. Something also tells you that you cannot do this. And every time there is a demand for the next season, there are usually challenges that come with that demand. And most often than not, what we tend to do is say, oh, I cannot do this. Oh, I cannot do this. The reason why you're saying you cannot do it is because your mind has not conceived the greatness that is attached to that season. And that is why one of the things I love to say, I love to pray, I don't know if there are believers on this call, is that Lord should expand the vision in my heart and also expand the vision in my mind. And I also ask that the thoughts of God enters my heart, the thoughts of God enter my mind. Because once it enters your mind, it can enter your life. Your mind is the gateway through which anything you will see in your physical realm passes through. If it cannot pass through your mind, it cannot enter your life. And that is why we must have a deliberate, a curating system for how we catalyze our minds. That's how I like to put it. So you don't wait for a season per se before you step into it. You can actually create a new season for yourself and step into it. We know that there are spiritual laws that guard seasons, right? But there's some things I usually say, and I say that you don't walk out of a season. You don't saunter out of a season. You don't wish yourself out of a season. You grow out of a season. And to grow, you must engage your mind. And to engage your mind, you must engage it with relevant knowledge, And there's usually something that happens when you are in an atmosphere of what I call catalytic knowledge. Every time you stay in an atmosphere of knowledge, all of a sudden you discover that you begin to think on a different dimension. Once your thought processes elevate, your life, as it were, also elevates. So that is why we must take deliberate care of what we feed our mind and how intentional we are in growing the mind's capacity. Because you see, the mind is an elastic phenomenon, as it were. Whatever knowledge the mind interacts with, it expands the mind. Every time you interact with new knowledge, it expands the mind. And may I add, new relevant knowledge, it expands the mind. What the mind has encountered, it cannot unencounter, if there's any word like that. What the mind has seen, it cannot unsee. So once the mind stretches like that, it cannot go back to its original form. And that is why we say, even if you don't understand what is going on, stay in a community, stay in a catalytic environment that challenges your thought processes. You may not know what is happening until you are faced with a situation where you would have behaved in a particular way or pattern. And then you discover that you are behaving in a way totally contrary, but better than your previous patterns. What happened was that there was a mind shift. There was a mind engineering that happened without you even knowing. But you can take it a notch higher, rather than stumbling into mind shifts, stumbling into paradigm shifts. You can now intentionally create for yourself a paradigm shift, a shift in your perspective, a shift in your mindset. And that's what I do, basically, for me. So when I discover that I need to shift from this level, there's something I know that, there's this thing, whenever you feel there's something that just happens in your spirit, where you know that something is beckoning for your next level. So instead of asking, like moving around and say, okay, what can I get doing? How do I now start moving into my next level? What I ask is, how can I grow to become the person capable of manifesting that next level? Because usually when there's a next level, it comes like it comes in like, how do I put it? It comes in a twin format. A next level comes usually with a new vision, a new perspective, something that God shows you. And usually when God shows you a vision, the person that God shows that vision usually is not the same person that actualizes that vision. You must grow to become the person capable of actualizing that vision. And that's where your mind comes into play. And I discovered that a lot of Africans, especially African women, have engaged in what I call mental laxitude and laziness for a couple of times, right? So that they find it difficult to engage their mind. And just like a baby, when a baby is born, you don't just start feeding that baby with eba and soup. So if you're not somebody who already has years or months of, personal development, mindset shifts, paradigm shifts, engaging with new knowledge, you don't want to stand up and say, okay, I want to just take on this large sum of knowledge. You start small, start with a book, start with a podcast just like this one, and say, okay, I'll listen to a podcast, maybe one podcast a day or one podcast in 3 days. And then you can now increase your capacity for more knowledge. Because you would see and discover that two people will be in a room and one person can sit down and listen to catalytic knowledge for 3 hours and the person is like, can you get me more? While another person is like, please, I'm feeling sleepy. How are you people even doing this thing? How can you sit down and be listening to this thing for 3 hours? I'm like, what are you saying? We are just getting started and the person cannot understand. And that's because you have not been exposed to that kind of life. So you want to take it bit by bit and then grow on into knowledge quest, paradigm shifting, perspective change, and personal development in general. So back to the question, I know I've said a lot of things. It is impossible to unleash a new version of your greatness without engaging your mind. It is impossible to unleash a new version of greatness without unleashing a new higher perspective in your mind. So it must first happen in your mind before it can happen physically. That's it.
Wow. Like I was two things were happening to me. One, I was seeing myself in the things you were talking about, and the second thing was, when a question comes in my mind, you now answer it again, because at a point I wanted to say, okay, for people whose minds are they just actually want to start their journey of greatness. How do they go about it? Then you began to talk about starting small. You began to talk about even if it's your knowledge quest, building capacity, you understand, and increasing it over time. And then when you gave the example of when you spend about 3 hours on catalytic knowledge and you're just starting and someone else is, how do you do it? Because honestly, I get this feedback as well, because over time I have been able to grow, but I have people around me who are also just coming up, and people who are listening as well who are just starting. So you've made clear to us that it's okay to start small. It's very important that you actually start small and then build capacity over time. And then I also loved when you talked about growing out of seasons. I see that a lot of people, and I'll be specific now, when I say women and mothers, we always want to rush out of seasons. We find it difficult to stay in the process, because the process can be excruciatingly painful sometimes. That's why even when a woman is pregnant, you're counting down. When the baby is finally out, okay, when will this baby start walking? And then the baby is walking around and scattering the whole place, and you're like, when will you just grow up? And then the child grows up, becomes a teenager, and you're like, oh, this is going on, probably financial implications and all. So I love how you talked about not rushing out of season, but growing out of season. And you were able to mention and tell us how the mind also plays in all of these things. So in as much as we may be in a painful process, maybe in a painful season, maybe in a healing season, it's still part of our mind. Another thing that struck me from the things you mentioned was the auto suggestions from the mind. How we tend to get more of the negative than the positive, how we tend to leverage on the negative. We listen more to the negative things and negative feedback that people give to us rather than the positives that come in. And when the positive come in, we tend to doubt it even more. So I would like you to actually speak on how can women, how can mothers block out those negative inner mindset conditioning, how the subconscious conditioning comes to place, how do they deal with it, and how do they enforce the positive affirmations, the positive thoughts that can now help them to climb towards greatness.
Okay. Thank you so much, Temitope, for this question. I really love this question. And I will come to it from two dimensions. The first thing I want to say is that I discovered that a lot of people are reactive when it comes to negative thought patterns than proactive. And I'll explain. So we wait to experience a negative encounter to say, I cancel it. That's not me. But there is a higher dimension, and that's proactive. And that's confessing the desired future even before anything that negates that future comes your way. So before the day starts and before I meet somebody who wants to annoy me, in the morning, I'm already saying this day is wonderful. My emotions are under control. I would not lose it at home. Nobody can control my emotions but me. I am subject to the Spirit of God. I am this, I am that, I am that. So you program yourself, first of all, such that when a negative thought comes during the day, it does not wield as much power as it would have if it met a blank mind or a blank, I don't know if you get what I mean. So it looks like you're fortified. So when it comes, the confessions has already gone ahead of it. So all you just need to do is that can't be me, because you know who you are. But most of us wait for these things, and then even worse still, we accept it, and take it, because we cannot really stop birds from flying over our head, but we can stop it from perching. So if you get a negative, something negative that does not align with you, some of us don't even know what is negative, and that's why we can't draw boundaries. And that's because we have not even understood ourselves, understood our assignments, understood our value, and understood our worth. And that is why, this is a short podcast, but, the journey to self-actualization starts, first of all, from self-discovery. Because until you discover you would not know what is meant for you. Anything goes. But when you discover you and you're operating from your unique identity, you know what does not align with you, so that even those things that look like a compliment suddenly doesn't look like a compliment. Say, no, that's not my vision. That's not me. I refuse to accept it. But if you don't know you, and if you're not aware of who you are, you become a dumping ground for any negative thought process. And then if you take it in, like most women do, brood on it, it becomes you, and you begin to live it out. And this is what happens to a lot of us while growing up. By significant others, family members, parents, our minds have been told a lot of negative things. We have been sub-conditioned to believe things that were not profitable for us. And some of us are living out these conditionings, even in our marital homes. And some of these conditionings are even the root cause of the problems we are facing today. So you must take a deliberate step in what I call mindset reengineering. It took time to condition your mind this way. Also give it time to recondition your mind. So what took 30 years to form this pattern, don't expect it to go in 1 day or 2 days. You must be consistent, you must be diligent, and you must be patient in what I call deliberate prophetic confessions if you are breaking an already existing subconscious conditioning. Right? So you find out what it is you are being conditioned about, first of all, and then get the opposite and start confessing it to yourself. Take, for example, let me use myself. When we were growing up, things were very wonderful. I grew up in very comfortable, but all of a sudden things got bad, and then all of a sudden there was some kind of scarcity, and it took a while. And so every time you ask for something, it's not available, it's not there. Oh no, you have to share. Oh, it's not. So I grew up, so that thing conditioned me to a mentality of scarcity, so I discovered that when I grew up, even when I have money, somehow it just exits my hand. So I had to deliberately, I created for myself confessions that were anti that scarcity mindset. Confessions like I operate from a place of abundance. Money comes to me. It's not the day I started confessing that I saw the result, and I'm still confessing it till today. Right? So the more I confess, the more that I discover that my attitude towards money changed and my relationship with money changed. Right? So the journey to mindset reengineering, which is also a reconditioning of what you have been conditioned to, is not a one-day event. That's what I'm saying. It's an intentional journey, and it's not a one-day event. It's something that will take time. But if you are consistent in it, taking those confessions, creating those confessions, and saying it over and over and over, something happens within your brain, because it has been proven that the neural pathways in the brain can be altered, right? So as you keep saying it, If your head is attached to an ECG or one of all those medical equipment, you will actually see the change in the patterns within your neural pathways. Something is happening, but you don't know it. But what happens to a lot of women is that after confessing and then you operate in a way that is anti what you're confessing, you be like, this thing is not working. No, it's working, but you are not just seeing it. So give it time. All of a sudden, you see that you have been changed into a totally different human being. This is one of the most powerful ways that I use. Another way is to take yourself and put yourself in an environment that is totally anti the conditioning that is not serving you. What do I mean? If you're struggling with a conditioning of scarcity, by all means, I'm sorry, but you don't have to be around people who are managing money or who are stingy or who are extremely frugal in like to the negative point. You need to step into a place where people are talking about money a lot. If it annoys you, it means that the conditioning is still there. When the conditioning goes, you will know that at that point, when they say it, you're no longer annoyed. You're like, how can we do it? Then you know that something has happened and something has broken. But if every time you see a couple, they say, hey, these people, no, the conditioning is still there. Stay there till it breaks, right? And so that's exactly how it works for me. And I hope it helps somebody on this call.
Definitely. Wow, you have broken a lot of tables. You didn't just shake it, you broke it. Really awesome. I loved how you were able to go deep and you used that explanation of the scarcity mindset, because it tends to affect a whole lot of people, and it just shows how the mind really affects a lot of things in our lives. And because it's something that has been cultivated over a long time, people find it difficult to admit that it is even there in the first place, because that's another issue. Because you have a mindset conditioning, but you don't even see it. That's why you said self-actualization is where you actually start from. And honestly, you can't actually start your journey to greatness. You can start your journey to purpose without actually starting from self-actualization, without actually knowing who you are, your identity, and then walking through it. And you talked about identifying patterns. We really have to sit down and do a lot of reflection to be able to identify some of these things that we have heard or we have seen as patterns in our lives and are serving as hindrances to be able to step into our desired place of destiny, into our desired life that we really want. And then I love how you also talked about that re-engineering of the mind, because I realized that sometimes people tend to get settled with where they are, feeling like they can't go beyond that mark. And sometimes it's satisfaction. Okay, my husband is in a good place, finance is okay, my family is fine, I'm good, I just want to stay where I am. So I really like to speak to that category of women or category of mothers, because I tend to meet people and I see that we tend to be clouded by the role and responsibility of being a mother, that they tend to lose guard of who they really are on the inside. Because the general thing is, or the general cliche is usually go to school, finish school, get married, have children, and then become a grandmother, and the cycle continues, which is totally wrong. That is not how it should go. But someone who has already had that preconditioned mindset and has now gotten to the stage of being a mother and is also living a comfortable life, how does the person walk back to identifying the person's self, to reconditioning that mindset and coming out of the ordinary, coming out of the role, coming out of the responsibilities and being who the person really is?
Thank you so much, Temitope, for that question. And I know that a lot of women are, in this situation, and some of them are in this situation by design, and some of them are in this situation by default. And a lot of them are not satisfied, but they don't know how. But I feel like, this not, respectfully speaking, living your life day to day without something burning in your heart or something greater than just your immediate environment burning in your heart, greater than your self needs, your family, nothing is burning for more in your heart is such an abysmal way to live. Right now, you may think that you're gaining fulfillment, from a husband, from children, but in a few years, you will start feeling very dissatisfied if you're not already feeling dissatisfied. You were not just sent to bear children, you were sent to raise nations. And when you have this ideology, even the way you raise your own children will change, because your assignment, actually, some women, their assignment is actually to raise those children. Somebody can have an assignment and say, God, I put a president as your seed. Your calling on earth is to raise this person into that purpose of being a president. But if you don't approach it as your purposeful work, if you don't approach it like you are raising a nation, what you would do is that you will either truncate that child's destiny, or you will totally derail him totally away from the destiny, totally. So there is always more. And that is why you must ask God to stir in your heart something greater than just the abysmal, something greater than just what you are currently experiencing. Because we see from where we are seated, right? If we elevate ourselves a little bit, just take it a notch higher, we can be able to see the bigger picture, right? Because at some point, the money or the affluence, or like one of my coaches will say, the gated estate you're living in will no longer matter, right? There should be something more that is burning in your heart. And if nobody anywhere on planet Earth is not grateful that you are alive because of the change you have caused in that person's life, I'm sorry to say, but you are not yet living. When you start living is when people are grateful that you're alive, not just because you are handing them handouts, but because you are calling things in them that they did not know previously existed. You are living for a purpose higher than yourself. So it is very important for every woman on this call listening to me to engage in something higher than just being a mother at home. Being a mother is not wrong, right? But the people that you were sent to, you're not just sent to your children, you are sent to other children. Your children they are just your primary constituency, not your only constituency. Do you get that? So when you have this paradigm, you begin to create an architecture in your life that will accommodate your different expressions to help these other things that you have been called to do, because that's where fulfillment comes from. That's where fulfillment comes from. And like one of my coaches also, who is also your coach, will say that at some point, these children also will stand up and say one day, I am looking for a matriarch in my mother. I'm looking for somebody who can give me solid advice. And she doesn't find it in you. I mean, for me, that will be very, very, very sad, right? That she will have to go outside to look for mentorship. Not saying that you cannot, but I should be your primary mentor. I should be your primary role model. I should model what is right to you. Because a lot of us, even sitting where we are sitting, are products of sacrifices our mothers did not make, or conditionings that our mothers accepted, or cultural dispositions our mothers accepted. That's why we are where we are today. Mothers that refuse to say no to cultural constructs, mothers that refuse to say no to traditional patterns of marriage, mothers that refuse to say no to abuse, mothers that refuse to say no, to things that are abysmal, mothers that chose peace, as it were, instead of war, in quotes, because sometimes you need to engage in war for peace to happen. But they say no, for my children's sake. And they were doing it for their children's sake, yet their children did not benefit from it. So that is why you must take a stand and say, because of the generations coming after me, right? I would not recline into a cultural construct that is not beneficial to me or to the next generation. I would do something today that the next generation would thank me for. Because as women, we are naturally how do I put it? We are made to conceive seed by our wiring. We are made to, to grow seed. We are path lighters. We are pathfinders. If you don't find out that path, the generations after you cannot walk in it. They cannot walk in it. And I'm sure that no matter how comfortable you are listening to this call, no matter the kind of affluence you're living in, if I ask you what you want for your child, you will not tell me you want the exact same life you're living. You always want something better. And if you're telling me that what you want is the exact same life you're living, you have put a cap on that child's life. So you want something better. But your child cannot get something better if you don't get something better. It starts with you. It starts with you. And then if you're in this call and you're a believer, there's a particular part of the scripture I love so much. The Bible says that until Deborah awoke, Barak did not arise. In meaning that she needed to awake. For the Bible to say that, the Bible says, awake, awake, Deborah. After she awoke, now says, arise, Barak. If the Bible should say awake, awake, it means she was sleeping. Something woke her up and told her that, you see this sleep you are sleeping, your generations will pay for it. So you better awake. And thankfully she awoke. But until she awoke, the children of Israel did not arise. So there are generations, people tied to your awakening. If you continue sleeping, they will never arise and you'll be held accountable for it. So I encourage everybody listening, awake to purpose, awake to a higher calling, awake to a higher perspective, awake to a higher paradigm, and begin to unapologetically release versions of greatness of you that you never even thought existed, so that, and to the end that the people coming after you can see a path that they can tread.
The room on fire. The room on fire. Amazing, amazing. Awake.
Literally.
Like that's just the discourse. It delivers the message completely, because we have to be awake in our minds. We have to be awake to the negative patterns. We have to be awake to the subconscious conditioning. We have to be awake to be able to grow out of seasons. Mm-hmm. We have to be awake to purpose, as you said, mm-hmm. to activate the change that we desire, and to come out of that satisfaction, quote and unquote, because mm-hmm. really there is no limit to how much more you can actually get. There's no limit to how much more you can soar. There's no limit to how much more you can rise. Wow. Thank you so much. So any other final words? Because I don't even have any question now, because you have laid down a lot of blueprints that needs action already. Mm-hmm. You told us to sit down and reflect. You told us to sit with self-actualization. You told us to re-engineer our minds. You told us to start building our capacity for knowledge. You've told us to enter into catalytic communities, because these are intentional steps that we must take to be able to get to that place of greatness. It won't just fall upon us. We have to go for it. So is there any final action words that you have for our women out there who are listening?
Okay, I think I'll just speak to, something that you just said. And what I would like to say is that I discovered also that a lot of women, have been engaged in patterns that are not profiting to them. And we keep going through those patterns. I've also been in that circle before. And a pattern is a series of repeated experiences with one common denominator. And that denominator is you. Right? So when you notice that you're having repeated patterns, instead of trying to change the circumstance, change the only thing that is consistent, and that is you. If you change you, which is what is consistent, every other thing changes. Every other thing changes. And that also speaks to, being very introspective. A lot of us, like I would say to some of our women, we know everything about everybody except ourselves. We can tell you about everybody except yourself. So date yourself again. Find out what works for you. Find out what the patterns that have come over and over again, because it's from a place of knowing you that you can reinvent you. You understand? So go back and date yourself again. Know the things that work for you. Know the patterns that have been limiting, and then skillfully come out of it through the things that we have shared. And then you said something which was so profound, about, getting, like, how I put it, but what it was just basically speaking to, and that is why I say unleash. Before, I used to just say unleash your greatness, until I discovered that there is no end, because this thing is a journey, it's not a destination. And that's why I say unleash your greatness. And I put that caveat, one version at a time. Because after unleashing one version of your greatness, you're like, wow, I did this. And God is looking at you and say, if I show you your blueprints in heaven, you have at least maybe 1,000 more versions to release, right? So when you unleash one, the design is that we'll keep unleashing. So that is why I say self-actualization is not a destination. So there will never be a time where you say, I've arrived. I have now self-actualized. Let me just go and rest. No, it is a destination, because every human is a compendium of endless possibilities. So until you die, you will keep releasing those possibilities. Your job is to submit yourself to the process that will bring about the birthing of these versions of greatness and possibilities. So if it worked the first time, go back and ask yourself, what did I do that unleashed the first one? Apply those principles with present instructions for this new one. And then you will just see that you now have a system that helps you to repeatedly unleash different versions of yourself at time. And I want to encourage every woman on this call. You can lead. You can lead. It is possible for you. No other woman is better than you, not even those on this call. You can lead and you can do what God has called you to be. That's my final word.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Don't even let me do a recap of that, because that is already, it's already awesome on its own and all-encompassing. Thank you so much for coming up on our show. So how can our listeners reach you if they would like to connect with you, if they would like to know more, if they would like to ask you questions with regards to whatever they're going through? How can they reach you?
Okay, on Instagram as Dr. That's Dr. Ezinne Okulehe. And then you can also get on my website also, which is also Ezinne Okulehe. That is EZINNEOKWULEHIE.com. So you can get the information on how you can reach me on my different social media platforms from there.
All right. Thank you so much once again. It's been a pleasure, awesome pleasure and privilege and honor having you as a guest on our show. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Bless you too.
Thank you for joining us on this episode on Mother's Haven podcast. I believe you've had a life-changing and liberating experience. To connect with us or reach out for support, we got you. Kindly send us a DM on Instagram at Mother's Haven or on mothershaven.com. Also, kindly hit the subscribe button to catch every new episode of our validating and inspiring content. Do also leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you.